I could feel my heart racing as my uncle's words hung in the air, the sting of his mockery still fresh. "Some people just have what it takes to succeed," he'd said, his eyes fixed on me, with the whole room laughing. My face burned with humiliation, the weight of years of judgment crashing down all at once. But as I sat there, fighting back the urge to leave, my phone buzzed with a message that stopped me cold. "Daniel Keller is 30 minutes out, says he's excited to finally meet you in person." I barely had time to process it before the doorbell rang. Uncle Rob opened it, and I watched as his voice shifted to something I hadn't heard before, something bordering on desperation. "Mr. Keller? What an unexpected pleasure." The next moment, Daniel Keller, the CEO of Apex Industries, walked into the room. He locked eyes with me, his face lighting up as he made his way across the room. "Good to see you, boss." The room went silent. My father's fork fell to his plate. My uncle looked like he'd seen a ghost. And Jake? His face drained of color. But what happened next? You won't believe it. Curious? Keep watching to see the full story unfold. They say success is the best revenge. But sometimes, revenge is watching your family's faces when they realize just how successful you really are. That's exactly what I felt walking into Jake's graduation party, knowing what was about to unfold. But let me backtrack for a moment to give you some context. Growing up, I was never the one everyone cheered for. My dad was a renowned surgeon, and my mom a federal judge. Every achievement, every milestone had a shadow looming over it. Their high expectations and accomplishments set a bar that felt impossible to reach. And then there was Jake, my cousin, the golden child. He was always the family's shining star, captain of the debate team, valedictorian, and now, fresh out of an Ivy League business school with honors. My family couldn't stop talking about him. To be honest, I never stood a chance. Meanwhile, there was me, the one they all quietly dismissed. While they were busy celebrating their perfect little world, I was building something quietly behind the scenes, something they never took seriously. I had a tech startup, an AI-based data security platform I'd been working on for the past 3 years. Nights and weekends spent coding, designing, and pitching. Every step forward felt like a victory, but my family wasn't impressed. "It's just a phase," my Uncle Rob would say. "When are you going to get a real job, Sarah?" My dad would chime in, "She's still playing with computers in the basement." I smiled and nodded, pretending like it didn't bother me, but it did. It always did. But I kept going, because I believed in what I was doing. I believed in myself, even if no one else did. And one morning, after months of work, something incredible happened. I finalized the deal. Apex Industries, a Fortune 500 company, acquired my startup. I had just become a silent partner and major shareholder. The excitement was bubbling up inside me, but I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents, not Jake, not even Uncle Rob. I didn't need their validation. But oh, how I longed for their recognition. The invitation to Jake's graduation party was one I debated about for days. I wanted to go, family, after all, but I wasn't sure I could face the inevitable digs. They'd never understand what I had accomplished. Still, I decided to go. I thought maybe this time it would be different. I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd finally feel like I belonged. When I walked into my uncle's estate, the familiar smells of champagne and catered food hit me first. But it wasn't the grand house or the fancy spread that caught my attention. It was my dad's voice. I hadn't even made it to the dining room when I heard him. "At least one of my kids is making something of themselves. Sarah? Well, she's still wasting time on that internet hobby while real professionals are out here building careers." I froze in the doorway. The entire room went silent as they noticed me standing there. I could feel their eyes on me. but no one said anything. I wanted to scream, to tell them how wrong they were. But instead, I just smiled and stepped inside, hoping no one could see the hurt in my eyes. It wasn't just the words that cut me. It was the fact that no one, not a single person, bothered to stand up for me. Not my mother, not even Jake, who stood there with a look of discomfort, but said nothing. I excused myself to the bathroom, just to escape for a moment. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the anger swelling up inside me. I wasn't sure I could make it through the night. Then, as I stood there, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was from my executive assistant. Daniel Keller is 30 minutes out. Says he's excited to finally meet you in person. My heart skipped. Daniel Keller, the CEO of Apex Industries, the very company that had just acquired my startup, the deal I'd spent months working on. I texted back quickly. Perfect timing. Meet me at this address. I couldn't help but smile. It was like fate had just handed me the moment I'd been waiting for. 30 minutes later, I was still sitting at the table, surrounded by my family as they discussed Jake's future and threw subtle jabs my way. But I wasn't listening. My mind was on the doorbell that was about to ring, and when it did, everything changed. Uncle Rob went to answer it, and I heard his voice shift, something in it I'd never heard before. "Mr. Keller? From Apex? What an unexpected pleasure." And then, through the door, walked Daniel Keller, impeccably dressed, his presence filling the room as his eyes scanned the crowd. He didn't look at anyone else. He didn't even acknowledge Jake, who was sitting there, speechless. He walked right toward me, a broad smile on his face. "There you are. Good to see you, boss." He shook my hand, and just like that, everything in that room came to a standstill. My father's fork clattered to the plate. Uncle Rob's jaw dropped. And Jake? He looked like he'd seen a ghost. But what happened next? Well, that's where the story takes a turn you won't believe. Have you ever felt like your family didn't see your potential or value your hard work? Drop a comment below. It helps to know you're not alone. The house was everything you'd expect from my Uncle Rob, massive, with a marble driveway that gleamed under the setting sun, surrounded by lush greenery and towering columns. It screamed success. His was the kind of house that made you feel like you were standing in the middle of a real estate brochure, where every detail was designed to scream wealth and prestige. Inside, the scent of catered food filled the air, mingling with the laughter and chatter of my extended family. I could feel my pulse quickening as I stepped into the foyer, clutching my phone like a lifeline, the most genuine thing I had in that moment. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but I was certain of one thing. It wasn't going to be easy. The moment I walked in, all eyes were on me. Most of the family I hadn't seen in months, if not years, so there was a strange, tense excitement in the air. It was like being a stranger in my own family, and all I could hear were snippets of conversations. "Oh, so you're still doing that computer thing, huh?" my aunt asked in a voice that somehow combined curiosity with condescension. I forced a smile, trying to keep my tone light, but inside, I was bracing for the worst. Then, my father's voice cut through the noise. I didn't mean to overhear it, but it was impossible not to. "At least one of my kids is making something of themselves," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. His words stung, like a slap to the face. He was talking about Jake, of course, my perfect, successful cousin. Sarah. Well, she's still wasting time on that internet hobby. I don't know what it'll take to get her to see what a real career looks like. I couldn't stop the heat rushing to my face. It was a moment I had prepared myself for, yet it still hurt more than I could have imagined. My eyes scanned the room, and I saw all their faces. My mother's pitiful look, my aunt's nodding quietly, my cousins awkwardly avoiding eye contact. Not a single person spoke up in my defense. I was used to this by now, but every time it happened, it felt like another tiny piece of me was chipped away. The night only got worse from there. Uncle Rob stood up to toast Jake, his golden boy. "Here's to Jake," he said, raising his glass with an exaggerated flourish. A brilliant young man, with a bright future ahead at the marketing firm. And then, as if to ensure I knew my place in the world, he added, "Some people just have what it takes to succeed in the real world. The rest, well, not everyone can be a winner." The laughter that followed made my skin crawl. It was that kind of laughter, the kind that wasn't directed at a joke, but at someone's expense. My stomach twisted as the voices echoed in my ears. I looked around, hoping someone would speak up, hoping Jake would stand up for me, say something, anything. But he didn't. He sat there, uncomfortably silent, his gaze focused anywhere but on me. The younger cousins? They were whispering, snickering behind their hands, no doubt sharing their own little jokes about me. The humiliation burned hotter with every passing second. I excused myself from the table and made my way to the bathroom, my heart pounding in my chest. I had to get out of there. I couldn't breathe in that suffocating atmosphere, the weight of their judgment pressing down on me. I closed the bathroom door behind me, leaned against it, and took deep breaths, trying to calm the storm of emotions threatening to spill over. It wasn't supposed to be this way. I had worked so hard, pushed through rejection after rejection, spent countless nights working while everyone else was out enjoying their lives. I remembered the early days of my startup. No sleep, constant doubts, and the hundreds of rejection emails I'd gotten. I remembered the small wins, the first time someone actually believed in me, the first successful pitch, the first milestone that felt like it mattered. And it all felt so distant now, like it had happened to someone else. But it had been worth it. Every sleepless night, every setback, every moment of doubt. It was all leading to something. I couldn't let this party, this night, ruin what I had fought for. That's when my phone buzzed. My executive assistant had texted, "Daniel Keller is 30 minutes out. Says he's excited to finally meet you in person." I read it over and over again, the words sinking in like a lifeline thrown into a sea of anger and frustration. Daniel Keller, the CEO of Apex Industries, the very company that had just acquired my startup. This was it. This was my moment. I could feel the weight of everything shifting. Without thinking, I quickly texted him the address to the party, not even questioning the timing. I knew what I was doing, but for the first time all night, I didn't care. I was done being the invisible one. I was done being the joke. I walked back to the dining room, my mind racing, a mixture of fear, excitement, and determination swirling inside me. As I entered, I saw Uncle Rob standing by the door, his voice turning to that syrupy, over-the-top tone I'd come to recognize only when important people were around. "Mr. Keller? What an unexpected pleasure," he said, his eyes lighting up as if someone important was about to walk into the room. And then I saw him, Daniel Keller, tall, impeccably dressed, the kind of presence that filled a room without even trying. His eyes met mine, and he smiled. "There you are. Good to see you, boss," he said, walking right past Jake and extending his hand toward me. I saw my father's fork fall from his hand, my uncle's mouth drop open, and my younger cousins freeze, their laughter dying in an instant. Jake, who had been basking in the glory of his achievements, looked like he'd just seen a ghost. In that moment, I could feel my heart beating in my throat, the sound of my pulse filling my ears. This wasn't just a twist of fate. This was my moment, the one where everything finally shifted. But what happened next? That's where the story truly begins. We've all had those moments when we had to decide between walking away or standing our ground. What would you have done in Sarah's position? Let me know in the comments. I walked back to the table with a new sense of confidence. My posture was different, straighter, my head held higher. Something had shifted in me. I wasn't just the black sheep of the family anymore. I wasn't just Sarah, the one they overlooked. I had power. I had a future that was already unfolding, even if they still couldn't see it. As I took my seat, the atmosphere was tense, almost like they knew something was coming but couldn't put their finger on it. The questions started again, but this time they felt different. My family had never been shy about prying into my hobby business, as they love to call it. "So, how's that little tech thing of yours going?" my aunt asked, half smiling, trying to sound casual. I could hear the undertones of condescension, the belief that they still couldn't take me seriously. "Still coding away in the basement?" Uncle Rob chimed in with a grin, clearly expecting me to shy away from the conversation, to brush it off like I usually did. But something inside me snapped. This time, I didn't shrink back. I didn't apologize for what I'd been working on. I leaned forward, my voice steady. "Actually, it's going great," I said. The words feeling almost foreign coming from my mouth. I could see their expressions falter. In fact, I just sold the company. Before anyone could respond, Jake, sensing an opportunity to extend some kind of sympathy, piped up. "Hey, not everyone can be cut out for corporate life," he said, his tone condescending in that way he always had when he tried to sound like he cared. It was the same old Jake, the one who had always been polished, the one who never had to fight for anything. I didn't even look at him when I responded, my gaze fixed on my father instead. "You're right, Jake," I said, my voice calm but filled with an undercurrent of something more. "Some of us are better suited to run them." The silence that followed was suffocating. For a moment, no one spoke. Even my younger cousins had stopped whispering, as if they were finally beginning to understand the weight of what I'd said. Jake's face turned a shade paler, and I could almost see him trying to piece together what I had just dropped on him. But the truth was, I had been holding this secret for months. I hadn't told anyone about the deal because I knew how they'd react. The same family who had laughed at my hobby for years would never understand that this wasn't just a random startup. It was a revolution in the making. My AI-based security algorithm had caught the attention of Apex Industries, the kind of company that didn't buy businesses without seeing potential. And now, they were valuing it at $75 million. That wasn't the only part of the deal. Apex had retained 30% ownership, sure, but they also gave me a board seat and a continued role as Chief Technology Officer. It was everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed. But what really stung was the realization that while I was rising, Jake had just landed his dream job at a mid-tier competitor to Apex. A job that, in the grand scheme of things, was nowhere near as big or important as what I was building. It felt almost poetic, the irony of it all. Jake, the one with the perfect life, the perfect resume, he was going to a job that would never allow him to reach the heights that I was already touching. That's when I realized I couldn't just sit here and let this moment pass. This wasn't just about my startup. This was about me finally standing up to my family, showing them that I had what it took all along, and I wasn't about to let them take that away from me. I heard the doorbell ring, cutting through the tension like a knife. I glanced down at my watch. A small smile tugged at my lips. This was it. This was the moment everything changed. "I'll get it," Uncle Rob muttered dismissively, standing up from the table. I could hear his voice shift as he stepped into the hallway, his tone instantly switching to one I'd never heard from him before, the kind of tone reserved for important people, the one that made him sound like he was doing something much bigger than himself. "Mr. Keller? What an unexpected pleasure!" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves, I wasn't sure if I was more excited or anxious, but I knew this was the turning point. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. As I sat there, every eye in the room on me, I could feel the weight of their expectations. I could feel the disbelief in the air. They were still trying to piece it together, still thinking I had to be joking. But when Daniel Keller walked into that room, when he made his way straight toward me, with his perfect smile and hand extended, they would finally understand. This wasn't some hobby. This was real. The moment Daniel walked in, the room went silent. I could feel their eyes on me, all of them trying to figure out how I had done it. Uncle Rob, still standing in the hallway, looked back over his shoulder, his voice shaky now. "Mr. Keller, we're so pleased to have you here," he said, trying to mask his shock. His face flushed. Daniel didn't even look at Jake, didn't acknowledge anyone else. He walked right to me, his hand extended. "There you are, Sarah." "Good to see you, boss." The room was dead silent. Every single person in that room, from my father to my cousins, was frozen in disbelief. I didn't need to say another word. Daniel had said it all for me. This was the moment I had worked for, the moment I had waited for. And I wasn't just going to let it slip by. I had spent years proving my worth, first to myself and now to them, and they were finally going to see who I really was. The door creaked open, and there he was, Daniel Keller, the CEO of Apex Industries, stepping into the room like he owned it. His presence was magnetic, a quiet confidence emanating from him in waves. He was dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my entire family's collective wardrobes combined. $10,000 worth of sharp, tailored fabric that made him look like someone who had just walked out of a business magazine cover shoot. Everyone turned as he made his way through the room, every eye following his movements. Jake, who had been seated at the head of the table just moments before, stood up to greet him, but Daniel didn't acknowledge him. He didn't even glance his way. Instead, he walked right past him, straight to me. The room was dead silent. Every single person in that room, from my father to my cousins, was frozen in disbelief. I didn't need to say another word. Daniel had said it all for me. This was the moment I had worked for, the moment I had waited for, and I wasn't just going to let it slip by. I had spent years proving my worth, first to myself, and now to them. And they were finally going to see who I really was. The door creaked open, and there he was, Daniel Keller, the CEO of Apex Industries, stepping into the room like he owned it. His presence was magnetic, a quiet confidence emanating from him in waves. He was dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my entire family's collective wardrobes combined, $10,000 worth of sharp, tailored fabric that made him look like someone who had just walked out of a business magazine cover shoot. Everyone turned as he made his way through the room, every eye following his movements. Jake, who had been seated at the head of the table just moments before, stood up to greet him, but Daniel didn't acknowledge him. He didn't even glance his way. Instead, he walked right past him, straight to me. "There you are." Daniel's voice boomed in the room, his hand already outstretched. "Good to see you, boss." Time seemed to stretch in that moment, like the entire room had frozen. It wasn't just what he said. It was the certainty with which he said it. The way the words seemed to hang in the air, as if he had just dropped a bomb in the middle of an already tense battlefield. Everyone in the room, from my father to my younger cousins, stared at us in absolute disbelief. It wasn't just the fact that Daniel Keller, a Fortune 500 CEO, had just addressed me like I was the most important person in the room. It was the fact that they had no idea. They had no idea what I had been building, no clue how far I'd come. The room remained silent, the weight of their confusion hanging thick in the air. Then, Daniel broke the silence, his voice animated as he launched into the specifics of the deal we'd made. Well, Sarah's company, he began, looking around at my stunned relatives, is revolutionizing data security with this new AI-driven algorithm. We're talking about a $75 million valuation. She's keeping 30% ownership, and we're giving her a seat on the board. Plus, she's staying on as the chief technology officer. I could see Jake's face shift from confusion to something else. Shock, then something that almost looked like admiration, mixed with a tinge of jealousy. But it was the mention of Forbes that really caught everyone off guard. And next week, Daniel continued, barely pausing, Forbes is featuring Sarah in their cover story. She's going to be one of the youngest innovators in tech. We're building an office in Silicon Valley, and we're putting together a team of over 50 employees to help scale this thing globally. The gasps that followed were almost synchronized. My father's fork dropped to his plate with a loud clatter, the sound breaking the stunned silence that had fallen over the room. My mother's face turned red as she quickly tried to recover, shifting uncomfortably in her seat. Well, I always knew you were capable of something, she muttered, as if trying to backpedal from the years of dismissal. But it was too late. The damage had been done. Uncle Rob, who had been standing on the sidelines, looking just as confused as everyone else, quickly found his voice. His tone shifted, now dripping with flattery. Well, that's incredible, Sarah. Truly. You've really outdone yourself. I always knew you had it in you, but this is... His words faltered as he tried to ingratiate himself with Daniel. It was laughable. His eyes were practically begging for a compliment, his earlier jabs now forgotten. Meanwhile, my younger cousins, who had been quietly snickering earlier, were now glued to their phones, searching for every bit of information they could find about my company. I could see their eyes widen as they read the articles and figures, the disbelief still fresh on their faces. The truth was sinking in. Sarah, the one they had mocked, had just made it big. But the most satisfying part of it all? Jake's expression. He'd gone from confusion to admiration, and then, as the full weight of the situation hit him, something else started to creep into his eyes. Envy. He couldn't hide it. He was standing there, watching me. The person who had always been in his shadow, now standing taller than ever. The reality of his dream job at a mid-tier marketing firm seemed small in comparison to what I had achieved. That was when he pulled me aside, away from the chaos. His face was flushed, a mixture of frustration and curiosity. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice low. "I could have applied to work for you instead. I didn't know it was this big." I turned to face him, my voice steady. "Would you have believed me if I had?" The words hung in the air between us, and I could see the uncomfortable realization settle into his eyes. Number. He wouldn't have. He would have dismissed me, just like everyone else. Jake didn't say anything in response. He just stood there, his face a mix of embarrassment and regret. And for the first time, I saw him as the boy he was. Someone who had never had to fight for anything. Someone who had always been handed his success. But not me. I had fought tooth and nail for every inch of the life I was building. And now, the world was finally seeing me for who I truly was. The satisfaction that washed over me in that moment was indescribable. This wasn't just about proving them wrong. This was about finally being seen. And the best part? The best part was that they couldn't take this away from me. No matter how much they tried to belittle me, no matter how many jokes they made at my expense, this moment was mine. And they were going to have to live with it. Nothing quite compares to that moment when people who underestimated you realize your true worth. Have you experienced a similar vindication? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. The dinner table was quieter now, the previous tension replaced by a strange, new energy. Daniel and I continued our conversation about the business, the excitement of scaling the company, and the challenges ahead. For the first time in my life, I felt truly respected by the people around me. Daniel was genuinely interested in my ideas, my vision for the future. It was a conversation about the work I'd poured my soul into, not the family drama or petty judgments I'd endured for years. And that felt good. Really good. But of course, it didn't take long for my family to try and insert themselves into the conversation, eager to rewrite history. "I always knew you had it in you, Sarah," my father said, his voice a little too enthusiastic as he tried to mask the awkwardness. "You've always been so smart. I just wanted you to have stability, to not get caught up in that tech stuff." I could feel the weight of his words, the half-hearted attempt at reconciliation. It stung, but I didn't let it show. "That's not quite how I remember it," I replied, my voice calm but firm. I wasn't about to let them rewrite the narrative, to pretend they'd supported me all along when, in reality, they had done the opposite. My mother, trying to salvage the situation, added, "I'll admit, I never really understood the tech industry, but I always knew you were capable of something big." I nodded, but my smile was tight. It wasn't about understanding the tech industry. It was about understanding me. It had always been about seeing my potential, something they hadn't been able to do until now. Then there was Uncle Rob, who, ever the opportunist, leaned forward with a look that was almost too transparent. "Daniel," he said, his voice dripping with insincerity, "I'd love to connect you with some of my colleagues. Maybe we could talk about some partnerships. Sarah's got such an incredible vision. I'm sure you'd love to hear more about her. Her potential is limitless." Daniel didn't even acknowledge him, and I couldn't help but feel a small sense of satisfaction. This wasn't about Rob or his business connections. This was about me, finally being seen for who I was. As the night went on, Jake approached me. His eyes were softer now, his expression more sincere. "I really am proud of you," he said quietly. "I'm sorry I never stood up for you." I didn't know how to feel. Part of me wanted to tell him exactly how I'd felt all these years. The hurt, the frustration, the years of being overshadowed. But there was another part of me that recognized the complexity of our relationship. He had been just as much a product of the family's expectations as I had. And in the end, we were both just trying to figure out our own paths. "Thank you, Jake," I said, keeping my tone steady. "But the truth is, you wouldn't have believed me if I had told you, and I didn't need your approval to succeed." His face fell slightly, and for a brief moment, I saw the vulnerability in him that I'd never noticed before. I felt a pang of sadness for the brother I never had, but I wasn't going to allow myself to be dragged back into the old dynamics. The doorbell rang once more, signaling the end of the night. Daniel and I left together, heading to a real celebration with my team, people who had always believed in me. The joy of finally being seen, truly seen, was more than enough for me. I didn't need validation from my family anymore. I had found my own path, my own success, and that was worth more than any apology or hollow compliment. 6 months later, my company was thriving. We had grown beyond what I'd ever imagined, and every day brought new challenges and new victories. My relationship with my family had changed, too. I kept my distance from the toxic dynamics that had always held me back. They were still my family, but they weren't the ones I relied on for approval anymore. Jake reached out to me one day via email, asking for career advice. I considered it carefully, then decided to offer him guidance. Real advice, but not special treatment. If he wanted to follow in my footsteps, he had to work for it. Success, I realized, wasn't about getting approval from those who had doubted me. It was about creating something on my own, building it with my own hands, and knowing that the strength to rise had always been inside me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, but about living well and on your own terms. What healthy boundaries have you set with people who didn't believe in you? Share your wisdom below. What would you have done in Sarah's position? Would you have revealed your success earlier, or was this perfect timing? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you've made it this far, you're clearly someone who values the power of resilience and self-belief. We've all had our moments of proving ourselves, but it's a lot easier to do when you've got a community that truly gets you. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe and join the crew. Because this channel, it's where the underdogs rise, where the quiet successes are celebrated, and where we all learn to stand tall together. Hit that bell icon so you won't miss the next incredible story. After all, who knows? The next revenge might just be yours.